The golden hues of the setting sun painted the sky over Rancho Prado Verde, casting long shadows across the once thriving fields that now lay in disrepair. Amanda Mendoza stood on the weathered porch of the family ranch, her sanctuary since childhood, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The gentle breeze carried the scent of wild sage and dust, a bittersweet reminder of better days. At 32, Amanda was a striking woman with sun-kissed skin and dark, expressive eyes that mirrored the determination of her spirit. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, a few stray strands framing her face. She wore well-worn jeans and a plaid shirt, the unofficial uniform of ranch life in this corner of Texas. As she gazed out over the land, memories flooded her mind. She could almost hear the laughter of her mother, Elena, who had passed away 6 months ago. Elena had been the heart of Rancho Prado Verde, her vibrant presence infusing life into every corner of the sprawling property. Now, her absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. Amanda's eyes drifted to the main house, where her father, Miguel, was likely sitting in his favorite armchair, lost in thought. Once a robust and commanding figure, Miguel was now a shadow of his former self, weakened by grief and illness. The loss of his beloved wife had taken a toll on him, both emotionally and physically. The sound of approaching footsteps drew Amanda's attention. Her younger brother, Carlos, joined her on the porch, his face etched with worry. At 28, Carlos had always been the more cautious of the two siblings, preferring the safety of numbers and spreadsheets to the unpredictable nature of ranch life. Amanda, Carlos began, his voice tinged with resignation, we need to talk about the ranch's finances. Things aren't looking good. Amanda nodded, her jaw set in determination. I know, Carlos. But we can't give up. This land has been in our family for generations. Carlos ran a hand through his short, dark hair, frustration evident in his gesture. I've been going over the books, and the debts are piling up. The drought has hit us hard, and we've lost too many cattle. Maybe it's time we consider selling. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Amanda felt a surge of defiance rise within her. No, she said firmly. We can't sell. This ranch is more than just land and livestock. It's our heritage, our home. As if to emphasize her point, a distant whinny echoed across the fields. The siblings turned to see a small herd of horses grazing in the pasture, their coats gleaming in the fading light. Among them was Tornado, their father's prized stallion, a reminder of the ranch's better days. Carlos sighed, his shoulders slumping. I know how much this place means to you, Amanda. To all of us. But we have to be realistic. The bank won't wait forever, and our options are running out. Amanda placed a comforting hand on her brother's shoulder. Give me some time, Carlos. I'll figure something out. We can't let Rancho Prado Verde fall, not without a fight. As darkness settled over the ranch, Amanda made her way to the old barn. The scent of hay and leather enveloped her as she stepped inside, the familiar smells bringing a small measure of comfort. She flicked on the lights, illuminating the spacious interior filled with memories of happier times. Amanda walked to the far corner of the barn, where a weathered desk stood covered in dust. It had been her mother's favorite spot to handle the ranch's paperwork, away from the distractions of the main house. With a heavy heart, Amanda began sifting through the drawers, hoping to find something or anything that might help their dire situation. As she rummaged through old receipts and faded documents, her fingers brushed against an envelope she didn't recognize. Curious, Amanda pulled it out, her heart skipping a beat when she saw her mother's elegant handwriting on the front. For Amanda, when the time is right. With trembling hands, Amanda opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. As she read her mother's words, tears began to form in her eyes. My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you, and you've found yourself at a crossroads. I always knew you would be the one to carry on our family's legacy, to fight for Rancho Prado Verde when times got tough. I have a dream, Hija, one that I never had the chance to pursue. I've always believed that our ranch could produce a champion racehorse, a horse that could compete with the best in the country. It's a risky endeavor, I know, but sometimes the greatest rewards come from taking the biggest risks. In the bottom drawer of this desk, you'll find a small lockbox. The combination is your birthday. Inside is some money I've been saving over the years, not much, but enough to get started. Use it wisely, and follow your heart. Remember, Amanda, you come from a long line of strong women who never backed down from a challenge. I have faith in you, in your strength and your vision. Make our family proud, and bring Rancho Prado Verde back to life. Con todo mi amor, Mama. Amanda clutched the letter to her chest, her mother's words igniting a spark of hope within her. She quickly found the lockbox and opened it with shaking hands. Inside, as promised, was a stack of cash, not a fortune, but enough to plant the seeds of a dream. As she sat there in the quiet of the barn, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the uncertainty of the future, Amanda made a decision. She would honor her mother's memory and save the ranch by pursuing this dream of breeding a champion racehorse. The next morning, Amanda called a family meeting. Her father, Miguel, sat at the head of the kitchen table, his once commanding presence diminished but still respected. Carlos leaned against the counter, arms crossed, skepticism written across his face. Amanda took a deep breath and shared her mother's letter and her plan to invest in a racehorse. Miguel's eyes lit up for the first time in months. Your mother always had a good eye for horses, he said, a hint of his old energy returning to his voice. If she believed in this dream, then so do I. Carlos, however, was less convinced. Amanda, this is crazy. We're already in debt, and you want to gamble what little money we have left on a horse. What if it doesn't work? Amanda met her brother's gaze steadily. Then at least we'll know we tried everything. Carlos, I know you're scared. I am too. But I believe this is our chance to turn things around. Will you trust me? After a long moment, Carlos nodded reluctantly. Okay, Amanda. But we need to be smart about this. We can't afford any mistakes. With her family's cautious support, Amanda threw herself into research. She spent long nights studying bloodlines, training techniques, and the intricacies of the racing world. She reached out to old family friends in the business, seeking advice and connections. Weeks passed, and Amanda's determination grew stronger with each passing day. She visited nearby ranches and attended small local races, always on the lookout for that special horse that could change their fortunes. It was at one of these local auctions that Amanda's life took an unexpected turn. As she walked among the stalls, assessing the horses on offer, she came across a scrawny colt with a patchy coat and visible scars. Most potential buyers passed by without a second glance, but something about the horse caught Amanda's attention. Despite his rough appearance, the colt's eyes held a fire that spoke of untapped potential. When Amanda approached his stall, the horse nickered softly, as if recognizing a kindred spirit. That one's called Zorro, the stablehand informed her. Bit of a lost cause, if you ask me. Been passed around from owner to owner. Nobody seems to want him. Amanda stood there, transfixed by the connection she felt with this unlikely animal. In that moment, she knew, this was the horse that would change everything. This overlooked, underestimated colt would be the key to saving Rancho Prado Verde. As the auction began, Amanda's heart raced. She clutched her mother's savings tightly, ready to take the biggest risk of her life. When Zorro was led out, there was little interest from the crowd. Amanda raised her hand, making the first bid. A murmur rippled through the audience as she continued to bid, eventually winning the horse for a surprisingly low price. As she signed the paperwork, Amanda could almost feel her mother's presence, guiding her forward on this new, uncertain path. Loading Zorro into the trailer, Amanda whispered a promise to the nervous colt. You and me, we're going to prove them all wrong. We're going to save the ranch and make history. As they drove back to Rancho Prado Verde, the Texas landscape rolling by outside the window, Amanda felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. Little did Amanda know that her decision to believe in this unlikely champion would set in motion a series of events that would not only change the fate of Rancho Prado Verde but also touch the lives of everyone around her. The journey ahead would test her resolve, challenge her beliefs, and ultimately reveal the true strength of her spirit and the power of unwavering determination. The Texas sun beat down mercilessly as Amanda guided the trailer carrying Zorro through the gates of Rancho Prado Verde. The dusty driveway crunched under the tires, announcing their arrival. As she pulled up near the barn, she could see Carlos and her father, Miguel, waiting with a mix of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. Amanda took a deep breath, steeling herself for their reaction. She climbed down from the truck, her boots hitting the dry earth with a soft thud. "Well," she said, managing a smile, "I'd like you to meet the newest member of our family." She walked to the back of the trailer and began to lower the ramp. Carlos peered inside, his eyebrows shooting up in surprise. "Amanda," he said slowly, "please tell me that's not what you spent Mama's money on." As if on cue, Zorro emerged from the trailer, his patchy coat gleaming dully in the sunlight. The colt's ribs were visible beneath his skin, and old scars crisscrossed his flanks. He looked nothing like the sleek, powerful racehorses they had all imagined. Miguel stepped forward, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of the horse. "Mija," he said softly, using the affectionate term for his daughter, "what made you choose this one?" Amanda placed a gentle hand on Zorro's neck, feeling the strong pulse beneath his skin. "I can't explain it, Papa. There's something special about him. I could see it in his eyes. He's a fighter." Carlos shook his head in disbelief. "A fighter? Amanda, he looks like he's one stiff breeze away from keeling over. How is this sorry excuse for a horse supposed to save the ranch?" Amanda felt a flash of anger at her brother's words, but she pushed it down. She understood his skepticism, she'd had her own doubts on the drive home. But looking at Zorro now, standing tall despite his rough appearance, she felt that same spark of connection she'd experienced at the auction. "I know he doesn't look like much now," Amanda admitted, "but with proper care and training, I believe he can become something extraordinary. We just need to give him a chance." Miguel nodded slowly, a glimmer of his old optimism shining in his eyes. "Your mother always said that true strength often comes in unexpected packages. If you believe in this horse, Amanda, then we'll support you." Carlos threw up his hands in exasperation but didn't argue further. As they led Zorro to the barn, Amanda's mind was already racing with plans. She knew they'd need expert help to transform this underdog into a champion. That evening, as the family sat around the dinner table, Amanda broached the subject of finding a trainer. "I've been doing some research," she said, pushing her plate aside and pulling out a folder. "There's a trainer named Fernando Trevino who's supposed to be one of the best in the business." Carlos raised an eyebrow. "Trevino? Isn't he the one they call El Loco? I've heard stories about his unconventional methods." Amanda nodded. "That's him. He's got a reputation for being eccentric, but his results speak for themselves. He's turned several underdogs into champions." Miguel leaned forward, interested. "I remember hearing about Trevino. Didn't he train that little mare, Kaispar, who won the Texas Derby a few years back? Nobody thought she had a chance." "Exactly," Amanda said, growing excited. "If anyone can help us with Zorro, it's Fernando Trevino." The next day, Amanda made the call to Trevino's ranch. After explaining their situation, she managed to convince the trainer to come take a look at Zorro. A week later, a battered pickup truck rolled into Rancho Prado Verde, kicking up a cloud of dust. Fernando Trevino was not what Amanda had expected. In his late 50s, he was a short, wiry man with a wild manner of salt and pepper hair and piercing dark eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore faded jeans, a worn leather jacket despite the heat, and boots that had seen better days. As Amanda led him to the barn, Trevino remained silent, his eyes darting around the ranch, taking in every detail. When they reached Zorro's stall, the trainer's eyebrows shot up, a look of surprise quickly replaced by intense interest. Trevino approached Zorro slowly, murmuring softly in Spanish. The colt's ears pricked forward, and he stretched his neck out, curious about this new person. The trainer ran his hands over Zorro's body, feeling the bones and muscles beneath the skin, examining the old scars with a practiced eye. After what seemed like an eternity, Trevino turned to Amanda. "This horse," he said, his voice gravelly from years of barking orders on dusty tracks, "he has known pain. But he has not let it break him. There is fire in his spirit." Amanda felt a surge of hope. "So you'll train him?" Trevino held up a hand. "Not so fast, señorita. Training this horse will be no easy task. It will require dedication, patience, and a willingness to try methods that may seem unusual. Are you prepared for that? Amanda nodded without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes. This isn't just about saving our ranch, it's about giving Zorro the chance he deserves. A slow smile spread across Trevino's weathered face. Very well. We begin tomorrow at dawn. Be prepared for hard work, long days, and more than a few surprises. As Trevino drove away, kicking up another cloud of dust, Amanda felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in months, she felt like they had a real chance. The next morning, Amanda was up before the sun, nervous energy coursing through her veins. She made her way to the barn, where she found Trevino already waiting, a look of intense concentration on his face. "Good morning, señorita," he said, his eyes never leaving Zorro. "Are you ready to begin?" Amanda nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "What's first?" Trevino's method of training, as it turned out, was unlike anything Amanda had ever seen or heard of. He began not with physical exercises, but with what he called spirit work. This involved spending hours just being near Zorro, talking to him, playing soft music, and even reading to him from old books of poetry. A racehorse must have more than just strong legs, Trevino explained when Amanda questioned this approach. He must have a strong spirit, a desire to run that comes from deep within. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, Amanda began to see changes in Zorro. His coat began to shine, his eyes grew brighter, and he stood taller in his stall. As they progressed to physical training, Trevino's methods continued to surprise her. Instead of standard track work, Trevino had them lead Zorro through obstacle courses in the fields, teaching him to navigate uneven terrain and unexpected challenges. He introduced scents and sounds that Zorro might encounter at a racetrack, helping him become accustomed to the chaos of race day. A champion, Trevino would say, is not born on the track. He is forged in the quiet moments, in the face of challenges, in the bond between horse and human. Amanda threw herself into the training with everything she had. She was up before dawn every day, working with Zorro, learning from Trevino, and still managing the day-to-day operations of the ranch. The work was exhausting, but for the first time in months, she felt alive with purpose. Carlos, initially skeptical, began to come around as he saw the changes in Zorro. He started helping with the training, his analytical mind proving useful in tracking Zorro's progress and identifying areas for improvement. Even Miguel seemed rejuvenated by the activity on the ranch. He would often sit on the porch, watching Amanda and Zorro work, a proud smile on his face. "Your mother would be so proud of you," he told Amanda one evening. "You've brought life back to this place." As Zorro's training progressed, word began to spread in the local community about the Mendoza's unlikely project. Some people were supportive, remembering the glory days of Rancho Prado Verde and hoping for a comeback. Others were less kind, scoffing at the idea that a scrawny rescue horse could ever become a champion. Amanda did her best to ignore the naysayers, focusing instead on the growing bond between her and Zorro. With each passing day, the horse seemed to understand more and more what was being asked of him. His runs became faster, his movements more graceful. One morning, about 3 months into their training, Trevino arrived with news that sent a jolt of excitement and fear through Amanda. "It's time," he announced, his eyes glinting with anticipation. "We need to see how Zorro performs in a real race environment. I've entered him in a small local race next week." Amanda's heart raced at the prospect. "Are we ready?" she asked, looking at Zorro, who seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. Trevino placed a hand on her shoulder. "Ready or not, it's time to take the next step. This race will show us what Zorro is truly made of, and what challenges we still need to overcome." As Amanda began preparing Zorro for his first real test, she couldn't help but feel that everything, the future of the ranch, her mother's dream, her own hopes, all rested on the shoulders of this once-forgotten horse. The unlikely champion they had discovered in Zorro was about to face his first true challenge, and Amanda knew that win or lose, this race would be just the beginning of their journey together. The days leading up to Zorro's first race were a whirlwind of activity at Rancho Prado Verde. Amanda barely slept, her mind constantly racing with thoughts of what needed to be done and what could go wrong. Fernando Trevino had intensified their training regimen, pushing both horse and rider to their limits. On a particularly grueling morning, Amanda found herself in the middle of a vast field, the Texas sun already beating down mercilessly despite the early hour. Zorro stood beside her, his coat gleaming with sweat from their warm-up exercises. Trevino's voice cut through the air, firm and unyielding. Again, he called out, gesturing to the makeshift obstacle course he had set up. Zorro needs to learn to navigate unexpected terrain at full speed. This will give him an edge on the track. Amanda nodded, taking a deep breath before guiding Zorro to the starting point. As they began their run, she could feel the power in Zorro's muscles, the determination in every stride. They weaved through poles, leaped over small hurdles, and made sharp turns around barrels. Halfway through the course, Zorro stumbled slightly on a patch of uneven ground. Amanda's heart leaped into her throat, but the horse quickly regained his footing, pushing forward with renewed vigor. As they crossed the finish line, Amanda patted Zorro's neck, murmuring words of encouragement. Trevino approached, his face unreadable. "Better," he said after a moment. "But not good enough. In a real race, that stumble could cost you everything." Again. And so they went, again and again, until both Amanda and Zorro were drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. As they finally finished for the day, Amanda couldn't help but feel a mixture of exhaustion and pride. Zorro had given his all, never once refusing a command or showing signs of giving up. Back at the barn, as Amanda was cooling Zorro down, she heard the crunch of gravel signaling an approaching vehicle. Looking up, she saw a sleek sports car pulling up, looking out of place among the dusty ranch trucks and old tractors. A man stepped out, his expensive suit and polished shoes marking him as an outsider in the world of Rancho Prado Verde. Amanda recognized him immediately, Jack Dawson, a wealthy horse owner from Dallas who had expressed interest in buying the ranch months ago. Well, Dawson said, his voice smooth as oil. "I heard rumors that the Mendozas were trying to get back into the racing game, but I had to see it for myself." His eyes fell on Zorro, and a smirk played at the corners of his mouth. "This is your big hope. Looks more like dog food than a racehorse to me." Amanda felt her cheeks flush with anger, but before she could respond, she felt a hand on her shoulder. Carlos had appeared beside her, his face set in a neutral expression. "Mr. Dawson," Carlos said coolly, "what brings you out to our little corner of Texas?" Dawson's smirk widened. "Just checking on my investment. After all, when you folks inevitably fail, I want to make sure the property is still in good condition when I buy it." Amanda stepped forward, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We're not selling, Mr. Dawson. Not now, not ever. Rancho Prado Verde has been in our family for generations, and that's how it's going to stay." Dawson chuckled, the sound grating on Amanda's nerves. "We'll see about that, sweetheart. One broken-down horse isn't going to save you from bankruptcy." With that, he turned and got back into his car, the engine roaring to life as he sped away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. Carlos turned to Amanda, worry etched on his face. "He's right, you know. We're running out of time. If this doesn't work..." Amanda cut him off. "It will work. It has to." She looked at Zorro, who was watching them with his intelligent eyes. "We're going to prove them all wrong." As the day of the race drew nearer, the pressure began to mount. News of the Mendoza's comeback attempt had spread through the local racing community, and opinion was sharply divided. Some, remembering the glory days of Rancho Prado Verde, were rooting for their success. Others, like Dawson, seemed to be waiting with bated breath for them to fail. The night before the race, Amanda found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of the house and made her way to the barn, seeking comfort in Zorro's presence. As she approached his stall, she saw a figure already there, her father, Miguel. Miguel turned at the sound of her footsteps, a sad smile on his face. "Couldn't sleep either, Mija?" Amanda shook her head, moving to stand beside him. They both looked at Zorro, who nickered softly in greeting. "Your mother and I used to do this," Miguel said softly. "The night before a big race, we'd come out here and just be with the horses. She always said it helped calm her nerves." Amanda felt tears prick at her eyes. "I miss her so much, Papa. I wish she could be here to see this." Miguel put an arm around her shoulders. She is here, Amanda. In every decision you make, in every step Zorro takes. She believed in the spirit of this ranch, and now you're carrying that spirit forward. They stood in companionable silence for a while, drawing strength from each other and from the quiet presence of the horse that carried all their hopes. The morning of the race dawned clear and hot, a typical Texas summer day. The local track was buzzing with activity as Amanda and Carlos arrived with Zorro. It was a small event, nothing like the major races they hoped to compete in one day, but to Amanda, it felt as significant as the Kentucky Derby. As they unloaded Zorro from the trailer, Amanda could feel the eyes of the other competitors on them. She heard whispers and snickers, saw the dismissive looks thrown their way. Zorro, despite his improved condition, still didn't look like a typical racehorse. He was smaller, less sleek than the other horses being led around the paddock. Trevino appeared at her side, his face set in its usual inscrutable expression. "Remember," he said quietly, "it's not about how they look at the starting gate. It's about how they look at the finish line." Amanda nodded, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves. As she began to prepare Zorro for the race, she fell into the familiar routine, the methodical actions helping to calm her racing heart. Suddenly, a commotion near the entrance to the paddock caught her attention. She looked up to see Jack Dawson striding in, flanked by a group of well-dressed associates. His eyes found Amanda, and he raised an eyebrow in challenge. "Well, if it isn't our plucky underdogs," Dawson called out, his voice carrying across the paddock. "I hope you're ready to face reality today, Miss Mendoza." Real racehorses, he gestured to a magnificent bay being led past them, not rescued strays. Amanda felt a surge of anger, but Trevino's hand on her arm stopped her from responding. "Save it for the track," he murmured. "Let Zorro do the talking." As the time for the race drew near, Amanda led Zorro to the starting gates. The roar of the crowd, though small compared to major races, seemed deafening. She could see her father and Carlos in the stands, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. Mounting Zorro, Amanda leaned down close to his ear. "This is it, boy," she whispered. "It's just you and me now. Let's show them what we're made of." As they took their position in the starting gate, Amanda's world narrowed to this moment. The other horses, the crowd, even Dawson's smug face faded away. All that existed was her, Zorro, and the track stretching out before them. The bell rang, the gates flew open, and they were off. Zorro's start wasn't the smoothest, the chaos of the other horses jostling around them momentarily throwing him off. For a heart-stopping moment, Amanda feared they would be left behind. But then, something clicked. Zorro found his rhythm, his powerful legs eating up the ground. They weren't in the lead, but they weren't at the back either. Amanda could feel the raw potential in every stride Zorro took. As they rounded the first turn, Amanda remembered Trevino's training. She guided Zorro to the inside, taking advantage of the shorter distance. They passed one horse, then another. The backstretch loomed ahead, and Amanda knew this was where races were often won or lost. She urged Zorro on, feeling him respond with a burst of speed. They were gaining ground, moving up through the pack. As they entered the final turn, Amanda's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. They were in fourth place now, the leaders just ahead. The crowd's roar became a dull roar in her ears as she focused every ounce of her being on the race. In the final stretch, Zorro seemed to find an extra gear. With a surge of speed that left Amanda breathless, they passed the third-place horse. The finish line was approaching fast, and for a moment, Amanda dared to hope they might actually win. In the end, they crossed the finish line in third place, just a length behind the winner. As Amanda slowed Zorro to a trot, the reality of what they had just accomplished washed over her. They hadn't won, but they had more than proved themselves. As she dismounted, her legs shaky with adrenaline and exertion, Amanda was immediately engulfed in a hug by Carlos. Over his shoulder, she could see her father making his way towards them, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Trevino appeared, a rare smile on his face. "Not bad," he said, which from him was high praise indeed. "We have work to do, but today, you and Zorro showed everyone that you belong on this track." As the small crowd cheered and people began to approach with congratulations, Amanda turned to Zorro. The horse stood tall, his coat gleaming with sweat, his eyes bright with the thrill of the race. In that moment, looking at this unlikely champion, Amanda knew that their journey was just beginning. They hadn't saved the ranch yet, hadn't achieved all their dreams, but they had taken the first crucial step. Against all odds, Zorro had proven himself a contender. And Amanda, with the support of her family and the unshakable bond with her horse, was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead on their path to greatness. The days following Zorro's impressive debut at the local track were a whirlwind of activity and emotion at Rancho Prado Verde. Amanda found herself at the center of a storm of attention, fielding calls from local reporters and congratulations from neighbors who had long since written off the Mendoza family's racing aspirations. As she stood in the barn, brushing Zorro's coat to a shine, Amanda reflected on how quickly things had changed. Just a week ago, they had been the laughingstock of the local racing community. Now, people were starting to take notice. Zorro's third-place finish, against more experienced horses from established stables, had turned heads. Carlos appeared at the barn entrance, a stack of papers in his hand and an uncharacteristic grin on his face. "You're not going to believe this," he said, excitement evident in his voice. "We've received invitations to 3 more races in the next month. Word's getting around about our dark horse contender." Amanda felt a surge of pride and anxiety. "That's great news," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But are we ready for this? Zorro's only had 1 real race, and we barely broke even on the expenses for that one." Carlos's grin faded slightly, replaced by a look of determination. "It's a risk, sure. But isn't this what we've been working towards? If we want to save the ranch, we need to take these opportunities when they come." Before Amanda could respond, they heard the crunch of gravel outside. Fernando Trevino's battered pickup rolled to a stop, and the trainer emerged, his face set in its usual inscrutable expression. "I hear congratulations are in order," Trevino said as he approached, his eyes taking in Zorro's condition with a critical gaze. "But now is not the time for celebration. Now is when the real work begins." Over the next few weeks, Trevino pushed Amanda and Zorro harder than ever before. Their training sessions grew longer and more intense. Trevino introduced new exercises designed to improve Zorro's stamina and responsiveness. He had Amanda study videos of professional races, teaching her the nuances of race strategy and the importance of split-second decisions. One particularly grueling afternoon, as Amanda and Zorro practiced sprints under the unforgiving Texas sun, she felt a moment of doubt creep in. "Are we pushing too hard?" she asked Trevino during a water break. "I don't want to risk injuring Zorro." Trevino's eyes softened slightly, a rare show of emotion from the usually stoic trainer. "The line between pushing for greatness and pushing too far is thin," he admitted. "But I've seen how Zorro responds to challenges. He thrives on them. And you, Amanda, you have the instincts of a true horsewoman. Trust yourself, trust your horse, and trust the bond between you." As the day of their next race approached, the atmosphere at Rancho Prado Verde was electric with anticipation. This race was at a larger track, with a more competitive field. The stakes were higher, both in terms of potential winnings and exposure. The night before the race, Amanda found herself once again unable to sleep. She slipped out of the house and made her way to Zorro's stall, finding comfort in the horse's steady presence. As she stroked his neck, she heard footsteps behind her. "I thought I might find you here," her father's voice came softly. Miguel joined her at the stall, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and concern. "How are you feeling, Mija?" Amanda sighed, leaning against her father's sturdy frame. "Nervous," she admitted. "Excited. Terrified. Is this how you and Mom felt before big races?" Miguel chuckled softly. "Every single time," he said. "Your mother used to say that the day you stop feeling nervous before a race is the day you should stop racing. It means you've stopped caring." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in thoughts and memories. Finally, Miguel spoke again. "Amanda, I want you to know how proud I am of you. No matter what happens tomorrow, you've already accomplished so much. You've brought life back to this ranch, hope back to our family." Amanda felt tears prick at her eyes. "Thanks, Papa," she whispered. "I just hope I can live up to Mom's legacy." Miguel turned to face her, his hands on her shoulders. "You're not living up to her legacy, Amanda. You're creating your own. And she would be so proud of the woman you've become." The morning of the race dawned clear and bright. As they loaded Zorro into the trailer, Amanda felt a strange calm settle over her. All the nerves and doubts of the past weeks seemed to fade away, replaced by a steely determination. The drive to the track was filled with last-minute strategy discussions between Amanda, Carlos, and Trevino. As they pulled into the parking lot, Amanda was struck by the size and energy of the event. This was a far cry from the small local track where Zorro had made his debut. As they made their way to the stables, Amanda caught sight of a familiar face that made her heart sink. Jack Dawson was there, surrounded by his entourage, looking as smug and confident as ever. When he spotted Amanda and Zorro, a predatory grin spread across his face. "Well, if it isn't our little Cinderella story," Dawson called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hope you're ready for a reality check today, sweetheart. This isn't some backwater farm league. This is the real deal." Amanda felt her cheeks flush with anger, but before she could respond, she felt Trevino's hand on her arm. "Save it for the track," he murmured. "Let Zorro do the talking." As they prepared Zorro for the race, Amanda tried to block out the bustle and noise around her. She focused on the familiar routine, checking the tack, warming up Zorro, going over last-minute instructions with Trevino. Before she knew it, it was time. As she led Zorro to the starting gates, Amanda felt the eyes of the crowd upon them. She could hear whispers, some dismissive, some curious. Zorro, despite his improved condition and growing reputation, still didn't look like the typical sleek, expensive racehorse. As they took their position in the gate, Amanda leaned down close to Zorro's ear. "It's just you and me now, boy," she whispered. "Let's show them what we're made of." The bell rang, the gates flew open, and they were off. The roar of the crowd faded away as Amanda's world narrowed to the track ahead and the powerful rhythm of Zorro beneath her. The start was cleaner this time, Zorro surging forward with confidence. They settled into the middle of the pack, Amanda keenly aware of the jockeying for position around them. She kept Zorro steady, conserving his energy for the right moment. As they rounded the first turn, Amanda guided Zorro to the inside, just as they had practiced countless times. They passed one horse, then another. Amanda could feel Zorro's eagerness to run, but she held him back, waiting for the perfect moment. The backstretch loomed ahead. This was where Amanda knew the race would be won or lost. She gave Zorro his head, feeling the surge of power as he responded. They began to gain ground rapidly, moving up through the pack. As they entered the final turn, Amanda's heart was pounding. They were in fourth place now, the leaders just ahead. The crowd's roar became a dull roar in her ears as she focused every ounce of her being on the race. In the final stretch, Amanda saw an opening between two horses. Without hesitation, she guided Zorro into the gap. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought they might get boxed in. But Zorro, sensing the urgency, found another gear. With a burst of speed that left Amanda breathless, Zorro shot through the gap. They passed the third-place horse, then the second. The finish line was approaching fast, and the leader was right there, just a length ahead. Amanda urged Zorro on, feeling him respond with everything he had. The gap closed, inch by agonizing inch. The crowd was on its feet, the roar deafening as the two horses thundered towards the finish line. In the final strides, Zorro pulled even with the leader. Amanda could see the other jockey's shocked expression out of the corner of her eye. Then, with one final surge, Zorro thrust his nose in front just as they crossed the finish line. For a moment, Amanda couldn't believe it. Had they really just won? The crowd's wild cheering and the look of sheer joy on Carlos's face as he ran towards her confirmed it. They had done it. Zorro, the unlikely champion, had just won his first major race. As Amanda dismounted, her legs shaky with adrenaline and exertion, she was immediately engulfed in a group hug by Carlos, her father, and even the usually reserved Trevino. Over their shoulders, she caught sight of Jack Dawson, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. But none of that mattered right now. Amanda turned to Zorro, who stood tall and proud, his coat gleaming with sweat, his eyes bright with the thrill of victory. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his manner. "We did it, boy," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We really did it." As the celebration continued around them, Amanda knew that this was just the beginning. They had proven themselves, shown the world what Zorro was capable of. But the road ahead was still long, the challenges still daunting. Saving Rancho Prado Verde would take more than one victory. But in that moment, basking in the glow of their incredible achievement, Amanda felt ready to take on the world. With Zorro by her side, her family behind her, and the spirit of Rancho Prado Verde in her heart, she knew that anything was possible. The unlikely champion had taken his first step towards greatness, and Amanda was ready to see just how far they could go. The weeks following Zorro's stunning victory were a whirlwind of activity at Rancho Prado Verde. The once quiet ranch buzzed with a newfound energy as news of the unlikely champion spread through the racing world. Amanda found herself at the center of it all, juggling interview requests, race invitations, and the ever-present pressure to keep Zorro in top form. One crisp morning, as Amanda led Zorro out for his daily exercise, she noticed a sleek black car pulling up the dusty driveway. Her heart skipped a beat when she recognized the logo on the side. It belonged to one of the most prestigious racing stables in the country. A tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit stepped out, his eyes immediately drawn to Zorro. "Miss Mendoza," he called out, striding towards her with purpose. "I'm Richard Thornton, owner of Thornton Racing. I was hoping we could have a chat about your remarkable horse." Amanda felt a mix of pride and apprehension as she shook Thornton's hand. "Of course, Mr. Thornton. What can I do for you?" Thornton's eyes never left Zorro as he spoke. "I'll cut to the chase, Miss Mendoza. I'm interested in buying Zorro. Name your price." The words hit Amanda like a physical blow. Sell Zorro? The very thought made her feel ill. But before she could respond, another voice cut in. "I'm afraid Zorro isn't for sale at any price, Mr. Thornton." Fernando Trevino appeared beside them, his weathered face set in a stern expression. Thornton raised an eyebrow. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Trevino," the trainer supplied. "And you're wrong. Some things are beyond price." As Thornton opened his mouth to argue, Amanda found her voice. "I'm sorry you came all this way, Mr. Thornton, but Fernando is right. Zorro isn't just a horse to us. His family. And he's not for sale." Thornton's face hardened, but he nodded curtly. "I understand. But remember, Miss Mendoza, sentiment doesn't win races. If you change your mind, you know where to find me." With that, he turned and walked back to his car, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. As the sound of Thornton's car faded away, Amanda let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thanks, Fernando," she said softly. The trainer nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at Zorro. "Some people will never understand what we do here," he said. "To them, horses are just commodities. But you and I know better, don't we?" Amanda nodded, running a hand along Zorro's neck. The horse nickered softly, as if in agreement. "We do," she said. "Now, let's get back to work. We've got a lot to prove." And work they did. With each passing day, Zorro grew stronger, faster, more responsive to Amanda's commands. Trevino pushed them harder than ever, introducing new training techniques and constantly refining their strategy. One afternoon, as Amanda cooled Zorro down after a particularly grueling session, Carlos approached, a worried look on his face. "Amanda, we need to talk," he said, his voice low and serious. Amanda's heart sank. She recognized that tone. It was the same one Carlos had used when he first suggested selling the ranch. "What is it?" she asked, bracing herself for bad news. Carlos sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've been going over the numbers. The prize money from Zorro's wins has helped, but we're still in the red. The bank is making noise about calling in our loans. If we don't do something soon." Amanda felt a surge of determination. "We will," she said firmly. "Zorro's getting better with every race. We just need a few more big wins." Carlos nodded, but the worry didn't leave his eyes. "I hope you're right. Because if this doesn't work out, we might not have any choice but to sell." The conversation weighed heavily on Amanda's mind as she prepared for their next big race. It was the Texas Derby, one of the most prestigious events in the state. The competition would be fierce, with some of the best horses and jockeys in the country vying for the substantial prize purse. As they arrived at the track, Amanda felt the familiar mix of excitement and nerves. But this time, there was an added layer of pressure. This wasn't just about proving Zorro's worth anymore, it was about saving their home. As she led Zorro to the stables, a familiar voice called out, "Well, well, if it isn't our little Cinderella story." Jack Dawson sauntered over, a smirk playing on his lips. "I hope you're ready for a reality check today, Mendoza. This isn't some backwater race. This is the big leagues." Amanda felt her cheeks flush with anger, but she kept her voice steady. "We'll see who needs a reality check, Dawson. Zorro's beaten your horses before, and he'll do it again." Dawson's smirk widened. "Brave words. But I wonder, how long can you keep this up? Running a racing stable isn't cheap. Sooner or later, you'll realize you're in over your head. And when you do, I'll be there to buy that ranch of yours for pennies on the dollar." Before Amanda could retort, Trevino appeared at her side. "Save it for the track," he murmured. "Don't let him get in your head." As they prepared for the race, Amanda tried to push Dawson's words out of her mind. But the pressure was mounting. She could feel the weight of expectation from her family, from Trevino, from everyone who had believed in Zorro when no one else would. As she mounted Zorro and made her way to the starting gates, Amanda's mind was racing. What if Dawson was right? What if they were in over their heads? What if this was all for nothing? But as they settled into the gate, Amanda felt Zorro shift beneath her. She looked down to see him watching her, his dark eyes calm and steady. In that moment, all her doubts melted away. This wasn't about the money, or the ranch, or proving anyone wrong. This was about her and Zorro, the unlikely pair who had defied all odds to get here. The bell rang, the gates flew open, and they were off. The roar of the crowd faded away as Amanda's world narrowed to the track ahead and the powerful rhythm of Zorro beneath her. The race was intense from the start. The field was packed tight, with horses jostling for position. Amanda kept Zorro steady, watching for openings, just as they had practiced countless times. As they rounded the first turn, Amanda saw a gap open up on the inside. Without hesitation, she guided Zorro through, picking up several positions in one smooth move. She could hear the crowd's roar increase as they made their move. On the backstretch, Amanda let Zorro open up his stride. They passed one horse, then another, steadily moving up through the pack. But the leaders were still ahead, setting a blistering pace. As they entered the final turn, Amanda knew it was now or never. She gave Zorro his head, feeling the surge of power as he responded. They began to gain ground rapidly, closing the gap to the leaders. In the final stretch, it was a battle of wills. Amanda urged Zorro on, feeling him dig deep, finding reserves of strength she didn't know he had. They were neck and neck with the leader, neither horse willing to give an inch. The finish line loomed ahead. Amanda could see Dawson's horse just a half-length in front. With one final surge, Zorro thrust forward, giving everything he had in those last few strides. They crossed the finish line in a blur, so close that Amanda couldn't tell who had won. The crowd was on its feet, the roar deafening as they waited for the official results. Seconds ticked by like hours. Amanda patted Zorro's neck, murmuring words of praise and encouragement, her heart pounding in her chest. Finally, the announcement came over the loudspeakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a photo finish. And the winner, by a nose. Zorro, ridden by Amanda Mendoza." The world seemed to explode around Amanda. The crowd's cheers reached a fever pitch. She could see Carlos and her father jumping up and down in the stands, tears streaming down their faces. Even Trevino was smiling, a rare sight indeed. As Amanda dismounted, her legs shaky with adrenaline and emotion, she was immediately engulfed in a group hug by her family. Over their shoulders, she caught sight of Jack Dawson, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. But none of that mattered right now. Amanda turned to Zorro, who stood tall and proud, his coat gleaming with sweat, his eyes bright with the thrill of victory. She threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his manner. "We did it, boy," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We really did it. As the celebration continued around them, Amanda knew that this victory was more than just a race win. It was a statement to the world that Zorro, the horse no one wanted, was a true champion. It was proof that dreams, no matter how unlikely, could come true with enough hard work and determination. There would be more challenges ahead, more races to win, more doubters to prove wrong. But in that moment, basking in the glow of their greatest triumph yet, Amanda felt invincible. With Zorro by her side, her family behind her, and the spirit of Rancho Prado Verde in her heart, she knew that they could overcome anything. The unlikely champion had risen to the challenge, and Amanda was ready to see just how far they could go. The victory at the Texas Derby catapulted Zorro and Amanda into the national spotlight. Overnight, they became the darlings of the racing world, their rags-to-riches story capturing the imagination of people far beyond the tight-knit community of horse racing enthusiasts. Rancho Prado Verde, once teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, found itself flooded with visitors, all eager to catch a glimpse of the unlikely champion and his determined rider. As Amanda stood on the porch of the ranch house early one morning, watching the sun rise over the fields that had been in her family for generations, she felt a mix of pride and trepidation. The past few months had been a whirlwind of success, but she knew that the hardest challenge still lay ahead, the Triple Crown. Carlos appeared beside her, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in his hands. He handed one to Amanda, a smile playing on his lips. "You know, a year ago, I never would have believed we'd be where we are now," he said, shaking his head in wonder. Amanda took a sip of her coffee, savoring the rich aroma. "Me neither," she admitted. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm going to wake up and find out it's all been a dream." Carlos chuckled. "If it is, don't wake me up." His expression grew more serious. "But Amanda, you know what's at stake now, right? The Triple Crown, it's a whole different ballgame." Amanda nodded, her grip tightening on her mug. "I know. But we've come this far. We can't back down now." As if on cue, they heard the sound of a truck pulling up. Fernando Trevino stepped out, his face set in its usual stern expression. But as he approached the siblings, Amanda could see a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "Good morning," Trevino said, nodding to both of them. "I hope you're ready for some hard work. The first race of the Triple Crown is just 6 weeks away, and we have a lot to do." And work they did. The next weeks were a blur of intense training sessions, strategy meetings, and meticulous planning. Trevino pushed Amanda and Zorro harder than ever before, introducing new exercises designed to improve Zorro's stamina and speed over longer distances. One particularly grueling afternoon, as Amanda cooled Zorro down after a punishing workout, she noticed the horse favoring his left front leg slightly. A jolt of fear shot through her. "Fernando," she called out, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "I think something's wrong with Zorro's leg." Trevino was at her side in an instant, his experienced hands running over Zorro's leg. After what seemed like an eternity, he straightened up, his face grave. "It's a minor strain," he said. "Nothing serious, but we'll need to be careful. He'll need rest for a few days." Amanda felt her heart sink. With the first race of the Triple Crown looming, even a few days of lost training time could be disastrous. "What do we do?" she asked, hating how small her voice sounded. Trevino's eyes met hers, his gaze steady and reassuring. "We adapt," he said simply. "We'll focus on other aspects of training while his leg heals. Mental preparation, strategy review. By the time he's ready to run again, you'll both be sharper than ever." The setback was frustrating, but Amanda threw herself into the alternative training with determination. She spent hours studying videos of past Triple Crown races, analyzing the strategies of successful jockeys. She worked on her own physical conditioning, knowing that every ounce of her strength and stamina would be crucial in the grueling races ahead. Finally, the day of the first race, the Kentucky Derby, arrived. As Amanda and her team arrived at Churchill Downs, she felt a sense of awe at the sheer scale and pageantry of the event. This was the big leagues, far beyond anything they had experienced before. As they made their way to the stables, a familiar voice called out, Well, look who made it to the show." Jack Dawson sauntered over, his trademark smirk in place. But Amanda could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Zorro was no longer the underdog to be dismissed, he was a serious contender. "Dawson," Amanda acknowledged coolly. "I hope you're ready for another reality check." Dawson's smirk faltered for a moment before he recovered. "Big words, Mendoza. Let's see if you can back them up when it really counts." As Dawson walked away, Amanda felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see her father, Miguel, standing there, pride shining in his eyes. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Mija," he said softly. "No matter what happens today, you've already achieved more than we ever dreamed possible." Amanda felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them away. There would be time for emotion later. Right now, she needed to focus. As she mounted Zorro and made her way to the starting gates, Amanda felt a sense of calm settle over her. The roar of the crowd, the flashing cameras, the pressure of expectation, all of it faded away. In that moment, it was just her and Zorro, ready to take on the world. The bell rang, the gates flew open, and they were off. The Kentucky Derby was a blur of thundering hooves, jostling bodies, and the deafening roar of the crowd. Amanda kept Zorro steady, working their way through the pack with patience and precision. As they rounded the final turn, Amanda saw their opening. With a surge of speed that left the other horses in their wake, Zorro shot forward, crossing the finish line a full length ahead of the nearest competitor. The victory was sweet, but Amanda knew it was only the beginning. The Preakness Stakes followed 2 weeks later, and it proved to be an even greater challenge. The shorter track demanded a different strategy, and for a heart-stopping moment in the final stretch, it looked like Zorro might be overtaken. But with a burst of speed that left the commentators speechless, Zorro pulled ahead in the final strides, clinching their second victory. As they prepared for the Belmont Stakes, the longest and most grueling of the 3 races, Amanda could feel the weight of history on her shoulders. It had been years since a horse had won the Triple Crown, and the eyes of the world were on Zorro. The night before the race, Amanda found herself unable to sleep. She slipped out of the hotel and made her way to the stables, seeking comfort in Zorro's presence. As she approached his stall, she was surprised to see Trevino already there. The trainer turned at the sound of her footsteps, a rare smile on his face. "I had a feeling I might find you here," he said. Amanda joined him at the stall, reaching out to stroke Zorro's nose. "I can't believe we've made it this far," she said softly. Trevino nodded. "When I first saw Zorro, I knew he was special. But you, Amanda, you're the one who made this possible. Your belief in him, your determination, that's what turned a broken-down rescue horse into a champion." Amanda felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Fernando. For everything." Trevino placed a hand on her shoulder. "Tomorrow, when you're out there on that track, remember this: you and Zorro have already won. No matter what happens, you've shown the world what's possible when you believe in yourself and never give up." The next day dawned bright and clear. As Amanda prepared for the race, she could feel the energy in the air, the sense of anticipation that comes with witnessing history in the making. As she guided Zorro to the starting gates, Amanda took a deep breath, centering herself. She caught sight of her family in the stands, her father, Carlos, even some distant relatives who had flown in for the occasion. She saw Trevino by the rail, his face set in its usual inscrutable expression, but she could see the pride in his eyes. The bell rang, the gates flew open, and they were off. The Belmont Stakes was a test of endurance, a grueling mile and a half that pushed horse and rider to their limits. Amanda kept Zorro steady in the early stages, conserving his energy. As they entered the backstretch, she could feel him getting restless, eager to run. "Not yet, boy," she murmured. "Wait for it." As they rounded the final turn, Amanda gave Zorro his head. The horse responded with a burst of speed that left the crowd gasping. They surged past one competitor, then another. In the final stretch, it was just them and the finish line. Amanda could hear the thundering of hooves behind them, feel the other horses closing in. But Zorro, drawing on reserves of strength and spirit that Amanda had always known were there, pushed forward. They crossed the finish line a length ahead of the nearest competitor. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the crowd erupted in a roar that seemed to shake the very ground. As Amanda slowed Zorro to a trot, the reality of what they had just accomplished washed over her. They had done it. They had won the Triple Crown. The next few hours passed in a blur of tears, hugs, and congratulations. Amanda found herself in the winner's circle, draped in a blanket of roses, cameras flashing all around her. She saw her father weeping openly, Carlos jumping up and down like a child, Trevino allowing himself a wide grin. But amid all the chaos and celebration, Amanda's focus remained on Zorro. As she stroked his neck, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart, she leaned in close to his ear. "We did it, boy," she whispered. "We really did it. Thank you for believing in me as much as I believed in you." In that moment, standing in the winner's circle with the horse that had changed everything, Amanda knew that this was more than just a victory in a race. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun on that fateful day when she had seen something special in a broken-down rescue horse. They had saved Rancho Prado Verde, honored her mother's memory, and shown the world that with enough love, dedication, and belief, anything was possible. As the sun set on that historic day, Amanda looked to the future with hope and excitement. This wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. With Zorro by her side, her family behind her, and the spirit of Rancho Prado Verde in her heart, she knew that there were still many more challenges to face, races to win, and dreams to fulfill. The unlikely champion had become a legend, and Amanda Mendoza was ready to write the next chapter of their extraordinary story.